When talking about writing in games, people often focus on traditional elements of literary craft: dialogue, plot involvement, and character development in relation to the surrounding narrative. While such focus is perfectly acceptable for strictly written stories, it often falls short in analyzing characters outside of the isolated written medium. This isn't to say that characters in movies or video games shouldn't be analyzed in some capacity through these lenses, but rather that restricting oneself to these traditional approaches often misses the more subtle storytelling techniques that can be capitalized upon in these non-traditional narrative mediums. Wuthering Wave's character Lupa is a prime example of making the most out of the entire video game medium her character is crafted in. And today, we're going to analyze how Kuro expertly handles the presentation and development of Lupa's character by fully capitalizing on elements of storytelling only available on a non-traditional visual narrative canvas. Lupa's character is presented to players early in Septimont's story. And, as with any character, first impressions are important, so our introductory scenes are filled with establishing information. The scene opens with Lupa's spear striking a fleeing gladiator before she comes into frame to attack and then sniff Rover. Within these first few seconds, Lupa's wolf-like feral tendencies are already established. Besides the obvious wolf tail, the fact that she is striking down a fleeing opponent furthers this notion that she is a predator beast. As the game later establishes, Septimontians are gladiators and hunters. Prey run, prey flee. Lupa, in this opening scene, is both a Septimontian hunter and a wolf. The following close-up shot on her teeth, showcasing fangs, and even her fighting style, literally going for the throat of her opponents, further highlights her feral side through visual representation. Her stance and words, however, establish her as being a strong, confident, and honest person. This latter point especially is emphasized by her criticisms of the targeted characters in the scene and their willingness to rig gladiatorial fights instead of fighting fairly. Despite being a feral fighter, Lupa has integrity and honor, characteristics again that the narrative attributes to the people of Septimont as a whole. Septimont and its culture is also presented to the player through interactions with Lupa. The stardom that being a renowned gladiator brings is displayed by the crowd approaching Lupa after the player's first match by her side. However, even in this positive interaction, the fan stating that Lupa's changing of partners is front-page material hints at undertones of a tabloid-esque gossip mill.
Did something happen with the Bow of Legions, Contender Lupa? Who's this new gladiator you've got with you? Did you replace Contender Emilio? Oh, that's front-page material.
The more sleazy side of the gladiator profession is further explained by Lupa, once again showing her keen sense of integrity and honesty through her disdain towards political hyenas and murky waters, as she phrases them.
That's how my family, the Silvers, have kept their position all these years. But the nobles here in Septimont are always hunting and contesting for more. Lions and wolves tear each other to pieces, while the hyenas lie in wait, eyes on their bellies. Everyone wants a taste of the juiciest meat. And with the illegal betting they're running, once they hear I've left the old team, they'll all be scrambling to get a piece of the action.
Are you planning to muddy the waters?
The waters are already so murky, no one can tell who's stirring them.
This is then followed up by an interaction between Lupa and her former dubious manager, Carter. However, the most telling scene occurs after the second battle. Here, the crowd gossips about rumors directly revolving around Lupa herself. And while one spectator defends Lupa's honor by stating that she's never thrown a match, the others are more cynical and refer to the necessity of needing strong backing from a large family like the Silvas to be successful in the arena.
Contender Lupa isn't in the Bow of Legions anymore. What a shame.
Just 2 days before the finals as well. It's unfair to her former teammates and her fans.
Is it about the money? She's changed teammates how many times now? As for that newcomer next to her,
Without the Silver's patronage, there's no way a gladiator from the outskirts could rise to fame so quickly.
Quiet down! Where are you hearing these rumours? Open your eyes. Lupa has never once thrown a match.
These few scenes reveal that Septimont's culture is ostensibly about glory and honor, while hiding political ambitions and underhanded tactics beneath the surface. Both sides of this coin will play a larger role with Lupa later on. Additionally, the very idea of a two-sided coin representing society is presented by Cristoforo later in the story. From here I want to skip to the first scenes within Lupa's apartment. Hitherto, the game has presented Lupa as a strong, confident warrior who has integrity even in the face of corruption. And while all of this is true, this apartment scene reveals Lupa's inner struggles in navigating the murky waters previously established. During this scene, Lupa expresses her love for being a gladiator, but also questions what she loves about it. Does she love the thrill of the fight or the perks that come with winning? Furthermore, she expresses a fear of losing what she's gained were she to ever lose favor. The juxtaposition of this scene to the previous scenes shows Lupa's struggle with Septimontian society's two-sided coin. For some, such as the Silvas, winning means everything due to the favor and power it brings. Because of this, these characters do everything, moral or otherwise, to ensure victory. And while Lupa too enjoys the favor that victory brings, doing so at the cost of integrity, embracing the underhanded side of society's coin, is not a line that she wants to cross, as has been previously established in the very first scene with Lupa. However, the fear of losing this favor still weighs upon her. In the scene prior to this, at the cafe, the proprietor comments that Lupa should have left the Silvas a long time ago, in which Lupa responds by saying that she needed a strong backer at the time.
Still got that fire, huh, Fulvia?
You should talk. Finally cut ties with the Silvers, eh? With the way they handle the share of profits, you should have left sooner.
Well, back then, a strong backer was exactly what I needed. Can't say it was all bad.
Now, upon the eve of the day she plans to expose the Silva's corruption, she has these doubts and fears regarding herself and the consequences of her potential actions. And it is here where Kuro begins to play further into the digital medium that is the vessel for the narrative. Hitherto, everything discussed could be achieved via writing and words alone. However, at this point, the background music, something not so easily expressed in traditionally written mediums, plays a larger role in the presentation of Lupa's character. The song that plays during this apartment scene is titled A Blazing Star's Soliloquy, and it embodies Lupa in this moment. The song itself is soft, and its opening is tinged with subtle sadness that is carried throughout the song via the solo piano notes driving the vocals forward. This musical undertone is representative of Lupa's inner conflict. Lupa's inner emotions are hidden beneath the surface and out of sight of the public crowds. While Rover may be there with her in this moment, the scene truly is a soliloquy of Lupa expressing her inner self and struggles. The vocals of the song, while soft like the rest of the song, are pure and crisp. They're Lupa's inner strength and resolve sitting above the sadness. As Lupa progresses through the story, the music surrounding her in key moments progresses too. This song is no exception, and it'll make a return later on in the narrative again, showcasing Kuro's effective use of the soundtrack in constructing the narrative. However, in this moment here, Lupa's thoughts alone lead to the deeper question as to whether or not one's self-value is linked to their deeds alone, or to the favor and recognition given by others for these deeds. This idea is lightly explored during the scenes with Cardothea and Lupa in the timeline where Lupa's role has been entirely usurped and she's forgotten. The idea of being forgotten and self-value are topics that are explored both through certain themes in this arc of the story and through the needs of specific characters. But, to go further in analyzing Lupa's characters, we first must understand the concept of character needs in literature. It was Kurt Vonnegut who claimed that in writing fictional characters, every character should want something, even if it is only a glass of water. What Vonnegut touches on here is the concept of character needs, best described by John Truby in his book The Anatomy of Story. Truby argues that characters, especially lead characters, must have both psychological needs and moral needs. A psychological need is a character flaw that directly and only impacts the character in question, whereas a moral need is a character flaw that plays into the larger moral argument or theme of the narrative and negatively impacts the characters and world surrounding the character in question. These character flaws are referred to as needs because the character must fulfill some sort of need or lacking quality in order to resolve and correct these flaws. Failure to do so leads to the character in question failing their goals or trials in the narrative. Lupa's psychological need is the acceptance of her own self-value and accomplishments. While she claims she might handle the doubts and ignore expectations better than others, such as Mia, she follows up by saying that commercial events is how she built her worth. Her previous partnership with the Silvas, even if the rigging of matches may not have been brought to her attention until shortly before Rover encounters her, still weighs upon her. This shame and doubt, while not overtly stated here, is directly addressed immediately prior to Lupa's confrontation with the Threnodian.
I've always carried this shame. Shame for something I didn't choose. Shame for something that's just there. Sometimes it turns into doubt.
When looking with hindsight from that point, the foreshadowing and seeds of self-doubt in Lupa are clear. Additionally, this psychological need is similar to Mia's own need. Mia, unable to simply shrug off the expectations of others, continues to try and live up to them, ignoring her own self-value and pushing herself beyond her own limits. Both characters put on a strong face in public, but suffer quietly in private. Of course, a major difference is that while Lupa, at least on this page of the story, has Rover to confide in and use as a support, Mia is entirely alone. In a scene showing Mia's isolation and inner thoughts, similarly to Lupa's apartment scene, Mia's musical theme carries a tone of sadness and potential regret. While underscoring a scene with emotionally befitting music is nothing new, do keep the theme itself in mind, as Kuro will build upon this later, and it will play a larger role in the expression of the narrative, character needs, and the overcoming of them. Currently, however, the similarities in character between Mia and Lupa are what's most important, and made even clearer by the flashing in of Mia in place of Lupa. And while that is done to show that the Threnodian is trying to usurp Lupa's role in the story, it also expresses the similarities between the two characters, including their shared needs. Lupa's psychological need also plays directly into her moral need, control and a sense of self in understanding her role in the events surrounding her. Knowing one's role is a common moral need throughout multiple acts in Rinascita, and we'll touch on it as it relates to multiple characters in more detail later. But in regards to Lupa, this moral need takes literal shape in Lupa losing her role and then being given the role of the protagonist later on. The second half of Septimont's story develops upon the established characterization of Lupa, And it is here where Kuro maximizes the potential within a video game to tell their narrative. Lupa, struggling to have her role in the story, is given the role of protagonist by Rover, before being sent off into the next page of the story alone. Upon regaining control, players are given Lupa, and only Lupa, to play for the rest of the story until a brief moment at the very end. While having stories change focus to different characters isn't new or exclusive to any singular medium, having active control of said character is. This is different from receiving temporary control of a trial character. While the Lupa given to players is technically a trial character, she is the only character, and not just for a single combat instance like many of the other trial characters of the past. This is the literal act of making Lupa the protagonist of the story from here on out. Having only access to Lupa for this is Kuro exhibiting her narrative role through the literal gameplay of Wuthering Waves. The confrontation with the Threnodian is where all of these pieces discussed so far come together. Here is where one of the driving forces of Lupa's character development is the music. In the scene where Lupa walks towards the Threnodian, the song playing is an instrumental version of Lupa's theme, A Blazing Star's Soliloquy.
I've always carried this shame. Shame for something I didn't choose. Shame for something that's just there. Sometimes it turns into doubt.
Again, the instrumental highlights Lupa's doubts and insecurities. No vocals are needed here because Lupa herself is narrating everything she has felt and currently feels. Upon reaching the still dormant Threnodian in Mia's body, Lupa stands confidently and claims that she no longer thinks like that, renouncing her past doubts and shame.
I've always wondered if I didn't have this gift, could I have reached this point with clean hands? Should I have judged those who trampled the rules to survive? Or was I blind to my own arrogance? Now, I don't think like that anymore.
The music here shifts to a version of the theme heard during Mia's flashbacks, the song Ode to the Nameless Martyr. The opening to this version lacks vocals but has a prominent percussion track. The strong beats of the drums act as the driving force of the song in its current state, while also symbolizing Lupa's resolve. To further prove this, it's important to note that this isn't the first time Kuro has used strong percussion to symbolize a character's strength and resolve. During Carlotta's story quest, upon escaping the mirror and rejecting her own self-doubts, Carlotta's theme is played with an additional strong percussion line. These percussion lines tend to come in only after the character in question has found the inner strength to resolve the conflict surrounding the narrative at the time. In regards to Lupa and the Ode to the Nameless Martyr, this same inner strength is being expressed at this time with the percussion. It's also worth noting that in the full version of the Ode to the Nameless Martyr, while there is percussion, it isn't prominent until much later in the song, after the initial chorus. This version of the song, however, progresses as the Threnodian begins to awaken. The vocals, the first stanza of the song, comes in as the Threnodian opens its eyes. This act too is symbolic of the character's present. The opening vocals have a layered quality to them, overlapping two separate voices in a quiet but haunting echo-like harmony. The lyrics are as follows.
Was it real? Was it mine? Was it worth it? Sometimes I feel
Both the layered voices and the words themselves reflect the doubts and desires of both Mia and Lupa. Because both of the characters' doubts are present, the previously driving percussion of the past movement has taken a back seat. Instead, the haunting tone and echo-like quality of the vocals share a similar quality to the whispers of the Threnodian, feeling the doubts expressed in the lyrics. After all, it is Rover who forces the Threnodian out of Lupa, allowing her to confront her self-doubts with the assistance of Rover's trust. But here, this time, Rover's not needed. The resolve is directly expressed through Lupa's own words and actions, and it is the actions of both Lupa and the Threnodian that call back to another point to further prove Lupa's role as the protagonist and a true Septimontian. Upon waking up, the Threnodian attempts to flee into another page of the story, similarly to how it is implied to have done so when Cardothea encountered it on a previous page. You may recall in the first scene with Lupa that she is striking down a fleeing target, prey. While fleeing may have helped the Threnodian escape Cardothea, Lupa is a true Septimontian and hunter. Prey, flee. As a hunter and a character with wolf-like tendencies, Lupa is the only one capable, from a symbolic perspective, of defeating the Threnodian. As Lupa chases the Threnodian into the next page of the story, she walks through the stories of Mia, Cardothea, and herself. The song that plays during this scene is titled Daughters of Rinascita, and the plural daughters is significant as it ties the three characters on display together. All three of these characters have suffered from the same moral need at some point throughout their character arc. This need is knowing what role they each play. For Cardothea, in the Avenolium, she was crippled with indecision by not knowing what role she played as a resonator. Her need to know whether she was either the Sentinels or Threnodian's resonator paralyzed her into inaction until Cantarella played the role of the mentor by telling her that she can decide her own fate and is not shackled by the circumstances of her creation. For Mia, she had to decide whether or not her role would be that of a heroic gladiator and martyr, or of a vengeful villain succumbing to the whispers of the Threnodian and destroying Septimont for being wronged and used by its people. Mia chose the former by impaling and throwing herself into the sea, and in effect rejected a predefined role given to her by the Threnodian due to being one of its failed resonators. For Lupa, on the pages with Cardothea, she had no role. It was stripped of her. However, upon meeting Rover, she was given the role of protagonist. Her choice came in defining the tale itself. Would she be the protagonist of Cristoforo's pre-penned tragedy, or would she rewrite the story and be the protagonist of a newly crafted comedy? All three characters are connected together in this moment and by their shared moral need. Recall that moral needs play into the larger thematic arguments of a narrative. A major theme of the entire story throughout Rinascita has been that people and life itself are not a predestined story. Each individual can shape their own role and influence the outcome of events through their deeds. By walking through this scene and witnessing the past stories of the other Daughters of Rinascita, the player is, again, actively leading Lupa to fulfilling her role and defying the outcome written by Cristoforo. While the scene is obviously railroaded, its impact isn't entirely lost, since it only progresses as the player actively moves forward. This, again, is Kuro taking advantage of the simple fact that it is the players who are in control of the protagonist of the story. Obvious and simple, yes, but it is effective nonetheless. And most importantly, it ties every character together to visualize Lupa's inspiration that is fueling her confidence and sense of self as she steps into her true role. In the cutscene that concludes Lupa's fight with the Threnodian, it is again important to discuss the music and its role in the narrative. Here, the full version of Ode to the Nameless Martyr plays. The lyrics in the last stanza of the song add to the shared line between Lupa and Mia. Both characters say that, "To me, there is no greater joy in the world," answering Lupa's questions from the hotel about whether or not she'd love being a gladiator if it didn't come with favor. The lyrics beneath this are as follows.
All the bruises are the clues that lead me to solution to my doubts.
The mindset that glory is not all about winning is in direct contrast to the more sleazy characters of Cartur and Domina Julia, and it expresses the honest integrity shared between true gladiators, regardless of skill. Like Mia and Lupa, glory is about integrity, pushing one's limits, and being one's best, not necessarily the results. This is the conclusion that both Mia and Lupa came to, and it is what allowed them both to fulfill their respective roles and defy the forces that attempted to predetermine them. If Lupa and Mia both shared a fear of being forgotten, then Lupa's final act for Mia puts those fears to rest. Her respect for both the traditions of Septimont and Mia are most notable in this scene. And even though Mia will never get Septimont's recognition and favor for her martyrdom, Lupa's act of bringing Mia's sword back to the burial sites of the heroic gladiators at least allows for Mia's deeds to be associated with the same heroics of those also resting there. The song Poetry for the Mountain that plays during this scene represents all of Septimont and its culture in this moment. It is a version of the same lyrics players hear when first entering Septimont, and it is a fitting closure to Septimont's chapter.
A blessed caress, Griffin's fortress.
But Lupa's chapter isn't quite complete. Lupa's after story has Rover find her drunk in her apartment. And while many may think of this scene as a forced romance, a more critical analysis and understanding of human relationships will show otherwise. Lupa has been through a plethora of trauma. By the end of Septimont's chapter, she remembers her entire time trapped within the repeating story crafted by Cristoforo, dying multiple times over. She's confronted Mia, the gladiator whom she most looked up to, uncovered the sad truth about her disappearance, and brought some amount of closure to her by returning her sword. Lupa herself even says that despite everything being over, there's still a heaviness, and that drinking helps.
Even though it's over, there's still a heaviness. A drink helps.
Her interactions with Rover in this scene are far from romantic. She's drunk and pensive. She's been supported by Rover over the past few critical days, and what some misinterpret to be romance is simply Lupa drunkenly reciprocating that support. She promises that Rover will never know defeat alone because those whom have been helped by Rover will, in turn, come to Rover's aid. That includes her. Furthermore, this scene once again faces Lupa with the question of regrets and whether or not she'd choose a different life if she could, similarly to the first apartment scene. This time, however, Lupa confidently states that she is content with what she has.
No need. I'm content with what I have. For everything gained, something is lost. But through it all, I met you. That's enough. Life is an arena. Victory and defeat are a part of that. No one wins forever. The more victories, the higher the expectation, and the heavier the weight of defeat. Do you fear that one day you might face defeat? You seem to live to meet others' expectations. This is what you're used to, I'd say. Even if one day you meet defeat, remember this. Those you've helped will never let you face it alone.
This scene both shows her personal growth and humanizes her. She's grown past her previous self-doubts, but that doesn't make her immune to sorrow or trauma. What people misjudge as affection for Rover in this scene is simply drunkenly expressed support. Lupa is drunk, pensive, and simply expressing her thoughts at this time. The scene is a good send-off to her character through its humanization of her. She is the protagonist and hero of this chapter, but she is still human and relatable. Kuro's writing of Lupa's character by utilizing parallel needs to juxtapose her to other key characters across the story, emphasizing visual and musical symbolism, and tapping into the player's agency all come together to masterfully capitalize on using a video game as a vessel to carry a narrative and develop Lupa as a character. While these techniques are not new in isolation, their execution in conjunction in this arc of the story is well done and produces a well-crafted character to carry the narrative. As the story of Rinascita starts heading towards its finale, one can only hope that Kuro continues to maximize the potential of Wuthering Waves and its story. Feel free to comment below about your favorite parts of the story or your thoughts on Lupa as a character. And as always, thank you for watching.